Not everyone's here, but I think we'll leave the doors open. I don't want any of the... If anyone comes late, I don't want them to miss out.
I have to hold the button.
No, you just hold it. Just hold it. It's fine. You just speak into it about this distance.
Okay.
I'm going to pass over to one of my distant cousins, Leanne Dyson.
That's part of the spiel. Good evening and welcome to History Night at the Eastern Yacht Club. In the event you may not know me, I am Leanne Dyson, great-granddaughter of Captain John Barr and great-niece of Captain Charlie Barr, which makes me cousin to tonight's speaker, Alasdair Purves. I'm very pleased that Alasdair is researching more detail into this history of yachting of the Barr brothers. I wish him much success with this project. Please welcome Alasdair Purves and marine artist Shane Capt.
Good evening, ladies and gents, mesdames and messieurs. Welcome to tonight's presentation, and thank you very much for coming and making us all feel so welcome. And it's always a pleasure to come to America. You guys have always been so kind to me. And it's great to be in Marblehead. It's a really beautiful place. So our talk tonight's called Built to Win, and we'll be exploring the untold story of Charlie Barr and his winning partnership with Nathaniel G. Herreshoff. I'm speaking tonight with my friend Shane Capt, the marine artist, who's brought these incredible paintings with him. So yeah, what happens when you put the world's greatest yacht designer together with the world's greatest skipper? I'm Charlie Barr's great-great-grandson, and tonight's story will be a sort of mixture of storytelling and art, and we hope it's an interesting mixture for you. But this story, I have to say, is worthy probably of a 500-page book, and it's been quite difficult trying to condense it all down. I compared it the other night, like trying to prune an oak tree into a bonsai. But if you feel like we're skipping over parts of the story, or if you have any thoughts or questions, we're going to have a question and answer session, so we can dive a bit deeper. Or also at 8 p.m. there's a dinner. I know some of you already signed up for that, but we're just happy to come and meet you all and chat with you all and share our passion. So before we start, we'd like to thank the Eastern Yacht Club for their kindness in inviting us, in Leanne and Bruce Dyson, Bill Lynn as well, for hosting us, and for Colin Thompson, the gallery owner, for making these talks happen. And also nice to see a few familiar faces. We have Jonathan King here, who's from up in Maine, and Seth Zoltman, the captain of the schooner Malabar X, Malabar 10, and the schooner Wenonith. So let's get into it. So how does this poor fisherman from Gourock, his hometown in Scotland, become the greatest skipper, arguably, in the world? And why is it that his story is relatively unknown? Well, Herreshoff and Barr formed one of the greatest partnerships in sporting history, and their successful defences of the Cup helped establish and maintain one of the longest winning streaks in the sport's history. So a little intro on myself. I'm Alasdair. Alasdair, spelt with a D. It's the Scottish way. As I said before, Charlie Barr is my great-great-grandfather, and he successfully defended the America's Cup 3 times and set a transatlantic record that stood for, as a speed record, 75 years, as the official monohull race record for a century. So despite these remarkable achievements, and despite being regarded by many as one of the greatest skippers of his generation, there's still no complete book, no film, and no single place where his full story can be found. So we're looking to put that right. Even in my country, in Britain, in the United Kingdom, where the story began, his story remains surprisingly little known. And it was more or less lost, I felt. When I was growing up, and I still am, I remember asking my grandmother to tell me the story, and she simply said, well, he was a successful yachtsman. What more do you need to know? But the more I learnt about his story, the more the sort of enigma grew. And a few years later, I was at the prize giving of the transatlantic race, the Rolex Transatlantic Challenge in 2005. I was surrounded by members of the Storm Trisale Club and the New York Yacht Club, and they were all sort of prodding me and saying, well, tell us a story, kid. And I was, at the same time, I was hoping that they'd tell me. So it was that was the light bulb moment. I realized that perhaps nobody knew the full story. They might know the sort of greatest hits, the highlights, but there was a lot of homework to do. And so fast forward a few years, and I've discovered an amazing story. It's a pleasure to share it with you. It's really inspired me. It's inspired me to go off sailing on some of these beautiful boats. And it's a story I fell in love with, and I hope you do too. So I'll introduce my next speaker, Shane Couch, who's, I think, well, the pictures speak for themselves, but I would say a marine artist of the highest caliber, probably one of the greatest we have alive today. To you, Shane.
Thanks, Al, for such a wonderful introduction. Please forgive me, I'm not used to having a mic in front of me. But yeah, I can't believe I'm here. You know, I've painted this scene of Marblehead so many times. But to be given this talk at the Eastern Yacht Club is certainly absolutely a dream come true. So I'd like to thank Al for such a wonderful introduction, and Bruce and Leanne Dyson for inviting us to the Eastern Yacht Club. And I need to do a special thanks to Colin, whose incredible belief in me has just given me so much belief in myself, and has challenged myself to increasingly get better. And he's constantly saying, "Come on, Shane, what's the story you want to tell?" And I owe so much to him. I won't be here without him. He's a special guy. And on the side, we're talking about the collaboration between Charlie Barr and that Herreshoff. Me and Colin have a similar type of collaboration. As a marine, I'm a self-taught marine artist. I've never had an art lesson in my life. And I'm dedicating my life to depicting these great yachts that Charlie Barr has raced and sailed and immortalised, and the J-Class, which came after them. The story of Captain Nat and Charlie Barr inspires me because their stories I can really relate to. Like Charlie Barr, I came from a humble background, yachts and yachting were about as far from the imagination as you can possibly imagine. But like Charlie, I believed in myself, I followed my dream, and it's been a long, hard, challenging journey. But I'm here today. Like Charlie arrived at Marblehead, and today I've arrived at Marblehead, and it's fantastic. And in Captain Nat, he was an engineer, an artist. People are often saying to me, it's a bit weird to find an artist who's got an engineer's brain, or an engineer who thinks like an artist. So, Captain Nat's story really resonates with me because, everything that he does is, part of my process. Sorry, I can see this is going in and out. So I learned so that the story which we're about to share to you today has given me so much inspiration and direction in the challenges which we all face in life. And believe in yourself, work hard, and as long as you've got that belief in yourself and you're willing to put in the time, things will come right. Now, their example has led me to following these beautiful yachts, which were Alasdair on the Atlantic. And, my happy place is, I'll close my eyes now and think about it, because, on the lee bow of a classic yacht schooner, when it's just that beautiful bow wave as it's powering through the sea, or on a quarter wave, and you've got a J-boat, it's really going for it. And I look up and I see the way the light hits all them glistening, wet deck, and the way the light reflects off the wet deck, and that beautiful glow from the sun as it comes through the sails and reflects on the water. And that's just beautiful. And I think to myself, yeah. It doesn't get any better than that. And these two guys, their story have inspired me to get into this live this life. And I want to share this story with other people, because like our story, it inspires, and it should be, it should inspire other people. So hopefully tonight we can inspire you too. Anyway, Al's going to tell you now how it all began.
Absolutely. Can you ladies and gents hear us okay at the back? Yep. The sound's all good? Great. Thought I'd check before we get into the meat and potatoes of it all. So let's go back to where it all began. So Charlie Barr was born in, by the way, we're going to try to not go too heavy on the dates and numbers and everything, but just actually give you the story, but he was born in 1864 in Scotland, a little town called Gurrock, which sits on a huge inlet of water. Some of you might know it, some of you might not. I'll try and find a little picture of it for you. So that's Captain Nat, aka the Wizard of Bristol, the man responsible for designing all these beautiful yachts. I consider him to be like the sort of Leonardo da Vinci of yacht design. It's a little montage of the two meeting. It's an original photo. Is it? I don't know. Might be a screenshot from one of my reenactments. Sorry, that's me getting into schooner life. Some of the beautiful schooners that I've been lucky enough to sail. I was on this one over here, Eleonora at the time, and then I became captain for a while of this one, Kelpie.
Can I interrupt you there, Al?
Sure thing.
I might need the mic. Because you don't know this, but I am in a little boat here. I was given the heads up that this schooner race was going to happen.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, yes. Yeah, so I jumped on the plane, hired a boat, and I was the only boat out there on the water for this start.
So our paths could have crossed much earlier. Yes, it's quite rare to get that number of big racing schooners together in the Med, but we do have quite a nice fleet. Okay, so this is the Clyde. Up here you have Glasgow, Gurrock, Largs, Fairley. And this is where a lot of the famous yacht designers in the time came from. And it's he was born in a time of a great outpouring of ideas and engineering, and he was lucky enough to meet some of the greatest yacht designers of his age. But his mother died when he was just 4 years old. He was sort of, I suppose, semi-orphaned, and he took up fishing. And his father actually tried to steer him away from a life at sea, I suppose particularly because he didn't have a mum to take care of him. And so he got him apprenticed as a grocer. But he got fed up of stacking shelves with tin cans, and I think he probably wanted to put a few silver trophies on his shelves instead. But it must have been tough, and his older brother, John Barr, who was 19 years his senior, sort of took him under his wing. And John Barr, who's buried here in Marblehead, They have the same father, different mothers. He was already a very well-respected skipper on the Clyde, and he really took him under his wing, taught him how to sail, and introduced him to some of the designers such as George Lennox Watson, William Fyfe. And so it was very sort of a potent environment for him to grow up in, even if he started with nothing, and life was pretty tough in the early days. So I'll do a little, let me see what slides I got. I just wanted to, I just want to talk about John Barr for a moment. So, yes, he was a crack skipper on the Clyde. He was a shipwright, father figure to Charlie. He knew G.L. Watson. There's a great quote of him, a story about him when he was out racing with George Lennox Watson, who's one of the greatest designers of the age. And he said, "Whatever you doing, Mr. Watson?" And George sort of sputters, "Well, I'm racing the boat as she was designed to be raced." And he said, "Oh no, you take my word for it. That's just how she'll no sail. Give me the tiller." And he sort of wrestles the tiller off this guy, but it just kind of goes to show the character of the man, and that he wasn't sort of starstruck, but I suppose he felt he was more of a peer to some of these characters. And there's another lovely quote I found where they're in a race and one of the observers is being passed by John Barr, and he says, I think I see his face now, brown as a gypsy, calm as a judge, and with a look of contentment, as if he was a man that had learned he'd just be, as if he'd learned he was just about to inherit a large fortune. But I went up, I put this story together by going all over the place, both sides of the Atlantic. And so some of it's from archives, some of it's from anecdotes passed down. And one of the stories I learnt from going to his hometown, that he was always famous for wearing a bright red sweater. And I said, "Really? How do you know that?" And the chap said, "Well, my grandparents were friends with the Barrs when they were in town." But looking at a black and white image, you'd never know that. And one of the other surprising nuggets I found was that he had a syndicate amongst the local fishermen. And I mean, these are Scottish fishermen. You just saw a photo of these guys. And they'd go cruising on the Italian Riviera each summer and hang out in places like Capri. So they got about. So another little piece of the puzzle that I found, because as I mentioned, no one gave me this story. I had to go out there and get it. And a bit like Charlie, I suppose, you had to go out there and get it. But I went to the Redwood Library and I found on microfilm an amazing segment of his early life, which, you know, they only tend to write about people after they're famous, but this is when he was just a little teenage boy, probably about 14 or 15. He was a deckhand on a fishing yacht, a fishing boat, what they call a smack. And it's sort of an open deck, there's no cabin, and they found themselves in a howling northeasterly gale that was blowing them away from the coastline there in Scotland where they're from. And they realized they were probably done for. You know, the storm had caught them by surprise. It was blowing them farther and farther from shore. The boat was filling from water on all sides, and little by little, each of the older men, you know, these tough Scottish fishermen, they collapsed through wet and exhaustion. And you can imagine the situation on board. You know, they're all feeling like they're doomed and done for. And so when the last of the men kind of gave up, he handed the tiller to the kid. And there's this amazing quote in the passage which I found, buried deep in the archives. And it says, "With the sublime faith of youth, a clear head and a hand of iron, he steered for his life and the life of his mates. And he turns the boat around, he goes down with the storm. They try to make one harbour and then another, and then they're approaching a headland, and they realize if they don't get into this harbor, they'll just be blown out to sea and lost forever. And it says nobody knew quite how it was done, but Troon Harbor was made in a wild smother of breakers, and everybody credited wee Charlie for saving the day, including the owner, who never wearied of telling the tale and always adding, "Aye, we'd all have drowned if it wasn't for Charlie's pluck and skill."
I like this story. Which mic's working, this one? Yeah, I like this story because, when you talk about Charlie Barr in later life, this kid, he's just a young kid, and in this he sort of exemplifies all of those skills which was to make him the great skipper. Make the skill, the ability to sort of weigh up the situation in a life and death situation, make the right decisions and believe in himself and his abilities, make the right call, and save the lives of his compatriots. I think that was everything. You look into there and you can see Charlie Barr. Everything which was to make him the great man and great sailor that he was in that instant.
So in the next segment, we're going to talk about how these boys ended up in America. And this section is really a sort of tale of two brothers. But through John Barr's connections, they got the gig to deliver a brand new racing yacht called Clara. It's a William Fyfe III. They got to America, they delivered it to the new owner. And then they turned around to go back home, and the owner said, wait, aren't you going to come and stay and do the regattas with me? He'd enrolled in all of these ones in this local area here. And so they said, yeah, okay. And they had a very successful season. And so that was sort of their first taste of coming across to America. And they took this little boat, Clara. They arrived when the Statue of Liberty was still under construction. Put a few visual references. So you can imagine what it was like for them arriving at that time. So this next segment, we're going to cover a few boats together. So they settled here. They first arrived here in Marblehead. And they were active sort of between New York and Boston. And there was a famous boat called Shadow. It was a Herreshoff yacht. It was launched in 1870, and at that stage, it had been unbeaten for 15 years. It was one of the favourite boats in Boston, called Boston's Pet. I think it's a Marblehead boat. Eastern Yacht Club. Yeah, getting the nod. And so when Charlie Barr on this boat here, Schooner, and if you just make a mental note of the profile of the boat from the bow. This is a G.L. Watson. When he brought this Scottish boat over and beat Shadow, I think he really made waves, particularly because look how young he is.
Yeah,
he's about 20 years old.
Yeah.
So I think it had a great impact on what was happening here. Shane, would you like to talk a little bit about?
Yeah.
Do you think they made waves here?
Well, you had these new boats coming in, which were the so-called plank on edge, which was long, deep, and narrow. And one by one, they were defeating, like you mentioned about Shadow. These boats, which have been largely undefeated, local champions for so long. Then you're getting these new boats coming in from the Clyde, and one by one, the old champions are falling, including Shadow, which had been largely undefeated for 15 years. And I think at this point, Captain Nat would have certainly sort of woken up to thinking, what's going on here? At this point, I think that people were starting to worry about the security of the Cup. So you had the sort of designers like Captain Nat and Edward Burgess. They were starting to look at these new designs, and obviously they were looking at the men who were racing them and sailing them, and wondering about we've got to start thinking about how we can come up with a design which incorporates the strengths and the strengths of both designs, and thereby hopefully should a challenge come from one of these cutters, we can make sure that the Cup is going to be safe. So of course Captain Nat gets the design for Gloriana.
Yeah, so Captain Nat sort of responds, whether he was directly sort of inspired or not, with a pivotal design called Gloriana. And actually, Shane and I have hotly debated this one, because I was adamant that... sorry, we've got this. Okay, so here's a photo of Minerva out of the water, so you get an idea of the keel. This is the plank on
You can see
design.
how she's deep, narrow.
But I was saying that Minerva probably inspired Captain Nat to make Gloriana. But anyway, we had our discussions about that.
Did.
But it was a response of sorts. And then another great thing that we discovered during our to and fro's, because Shane and I, this is since we met, this is a conversation that hasn't really stopped. And so we've argued a lot of the points quite strongly until the sort of facts were settled.
Yep.
But one of the things I said was Charlie Barr helmed this pivotal boat that Herreshoff designed. This is a sort of step away from his previous designs. And Shane said, no, he didn't.
He was on a weenie. Halloween.
And so then I found this photograph and I said, well, yes, he did. Here's Gloriana at the finish line. Yeah. And I said, look, Shane, come on. This is the unmistakable silhouette of Captain Nat with his straw bow to his beard. And I know it's not the best resolution, but the unmistakable silhouette of Charlie Barr. So I have one record here of him racing, and he has another saying, no, he was in the New York Times quoted as being on Owen.
Yes, but
Edward Burgess.
Yeah, but then I was digging into the history of the Yacht Club, and it mentioned that Owen, on the Golet Cup, on the first leg, a topmast was dismasted. So the race after that, she was unable to compete. So we've sort of put this together that maybe Charlie Barr was ashore and Captain Nat said, "Want to come for a sail?" And that puts them together.
That puts them together. I'm just going to quickly go back and mention John Barr again, because you can see the age difference. Here's John Barr in his sort of 40s, and here's a very young Charlie Barr there. This is the crew of a boat called Thistle, which was his first taste, or their first taste, of the America's Cup. So finally the boys feel like they've landed somewhere. Watson's a Scottish design, so it's a Scottish boat, Scottish crew, very Scottish name, Thistle, and Scottish captain. And they really think they're going to go over and wrestle the cup off the Americans. Except they don't. So it was a huge disappointment for John Barr, even though he's one of the finest skippers of that era. And but when he went back to Scotland, he found that the locals were quite unforgiving. And I have Scottish family; they can hold a grudge for generations. So I think that kind of catalysed their move across to Marblehead, and at the same time they were here, as you lovely people are doing, and welcoming them with open arms and giving them lots of opportunities. So that was kind of a done deal. Also, there was a question of their citizenship. They went to court, and the judge basically said, "Well, how long have you been here? What have you been up to?" And he said, "I can't accept your request for citizenship because you spent all your time sailing Scottish yachts." So I think that was another catalyst that caused them to switch. So that brings us to Wasp, who... What did you say about Wasp?
Wasp is the real ancestor. Everyone looks at Gloriana as being the pivotal change in yacht design, but it's actually Wasp, which was the 46-footer, which is designed after Gloriana, which is a true ancestor of modern yachts, because Captain Nat fully developed the spoon bow. The spoon bow being that when the yacht is heeled, its waterline carries on for the maximum amount of distance to the overhangs on the bow. So the waterlines extend as the yacht goes over, heels over.
Shane is an aeronautical engineer and then a painter.
Yeah, and she also had a bull keel. One of the unique things about the Herreshoff designs was because he'd been building steam yachts throughout the 1880s. He wasn't building sailing boats; he was primarily building steamboats. But what this allowed him to do was to really look into sort of hull construction and weight saving construction and maximum strength for the minimum amount of material. So when he applied this into yachts, it allowed him to put he saved the weight, so he allowed to put most of the weight lower down, which allowed him to put more sail area on. So everyone was looking at Gloriana going back in time and thinking it was all about a bow, but it wasn't. It was all about her, her lightweight construction, which allowed lower weight. And in Wasp, he fully developed his ideas, with sort of the low bulb keel and the fully rounded bow, which, it's the ancestor of all modern yachts today. So, yeah.
And I think Captain Nat and Charlie had met during their time probably and solidified their friendship during Gloriana. But this is the first boat of Herreshoff's, the brand new design. It's quite a step away from what he's been doing before. And he gives this young kid the helm, the responsibility. So he's, Herreshoff was already his senior.
I will interrupt you because the interesting thing about this season was Charlie Barr was in Wasp and John Barr was in Gloriana.
So there you go. There must have been a little bit of sibling rivalry.
Well, I think John would have been really proud to see his young brother in the new Herreshoff boat competing with him. He must have, it was 20 years between them. He must have been proud.
Absolutely. I think John was a good older brother and he encouraged him the whole way. I love this photo, by the way, of Wasp, almost like a dolphin leaping out of the water. Another interesting point, I'll just quickly touch on, is it had a bulb keel. Now, this just shows you what an innovator that Captain Nat was, because we're in the 1890s here, and bulb keels weren't really, I don't think they really came into common use.
Well, I won't be too technical, but the year before he designed the first fin keel in Dilemma. Now, my theory is he combined the fin keel with the design he come up with Gloriana and came up with the bulb keel. If you look at the two shapes, and we had this conversation in the Herreshoff Museum recently, and you can see how he's just combined the two shapes, molded them together.
So yeah, I mean, bulb keels didn't really come into common use until probably the 1960s. I don't know, is that a fair statement? Here he is on Wasp, Captain Charlie Barr, and who's he? I'm just zooming in here. Who's he sitting next to? This is the formation of the winning partnership here. This is why our talk's called Built to Win. This is the winning combo between the master designer and the master helmsman, just beginning to develop here. So the next chapter, we're just going to speak about sort of his ascent. Now that he's got the Herreshoff gig, he's become sort of Captain Nat's best pal, and he's been given the helm of all the new boats. He gets aboard Navajo, which is his first big boat. And actually, there's more to running a boat than just being a good helmsman, and he really struggled with managing this one. I think he found it quite overwhelming, suddenly managing a crew, preventing them from going ashore and getting drunk, and all the provisioning and all the other stuff that comes with being a big boat captain. So he sets out from Bristol. The boat's been designed. The owner, Phelps Carroll, has decided he wants to go and win some trophies in European waters, and they run into a bit of a setback. They actually run into this lightship in Nantucket. It says Boston on it. It's the Nantucket. This is the actual boat here, in dense fog, which kind of shows you the accuracy of his navigation skills. I think he offset his waypoints after that, but they had to basically limp into Boston, get some hastily made repairs, and it set his relationship off with the owner to a very bad start. Yeah, he's on the wrong foot, and they had to replace the rig with something much, much heavier. Anyway, he goes over to British waters. He's facing some of the biggest cutters of the era. Hang on, let's skipping forward here. And he has an amazing race against the King's Yacht Britannia. This is King Edward VII. And in later life, Charlie Barr would look back on this race as the greatest race of his career, because it was sailed across the English Channel. It was the Brenton Reef Challenge Cup. So Phelps Carroll wanted to bring that back home to the States, and Britannia was the boat to beat. So the two of them, Navajo and Britannia, in a full gale with a topmast housed.
They had to house a topmast mid-race, mid-channel,
which would have been a hell of a manoeuvre. And they were neck and neck the whole way across. And Charlie Barr wins on sort of corrected time. In the gale, it had blown one of the markers for the finish line, and so the owner protested and won. But they were that close the whole way through. Makes you wonder that actually, if they'd had the lighter rig, they would have probably had a more decisive victory. But anyway, that's his first major feather in his cap. He's beaten the King of England. He's beaten Britannia, and during this season, he breaks his clock, the chronometer on board. So he's in Southampton and he takes it to this place. Everyone's thinking, what's the point in this story? Well, it's a very important story because he meets the girl at the desk there, and it's young Emily Smith. She's the daughter of the owner. They make marine instruments, barometers, compasses, etc. And it's love at first sight, because he returned a year later to marry her. So, he clearly got his instrument calibrated. And then but meanwhile, it's an eventful year. He's taken the first big boat across the Atlantic. He's won some big cups. He's, going west to east for the first time. And he's getting married. But meanwhile, on the other side of the Atlantic,
Captain Nat's having a busy year. Unfortunately, Edward Burgess, who designed the 3 previous cup defenders, died early of, I think it was tuberculosis. So Captain Nat now gets the order for 2 new cup defenders, Colonia and Vigilant. Now, Colonia was kind of like an enlarged Wasp, but Vigilant was more of a centreboarder. But what amazes me about this, he was up against all of the top designers in the world, William Fife and G.L. Watson, and they were using all the latest methods of design. They were using, complex calculations, drawings, tank testing. Captain Nat fashioned his designs from a block of wood with a chisel and a plane. So he's chiseling away these designs which repeatedly defeated the best designers in the world. Now, I find that amazing. When I was doing my research, there's a quote by Francis Herreshoff, who was his son, saying, there's something about a 3D form over a 2D form. And I get it, because I use models quite extensively in what I do. Now, there's something about when you create a model and you hold it in 3D, you kind of get its characters and you understand it. And it's almost like, it's like a baby, and you bond with it like a mother and a child. Now, I think Captain Nat got this approach from his brother, because his brother, John Barr, was blind. So as a young child, Captain Nat used to sort of assist his brother in his boat building shed, and his blind brother used to sort of trace the lines of boats into construction, and he can tell if they're out of fairing or if there's a problem with the lines. And I think Captain Nat instinctively know by a sense of touch and feel how a boat should be. So I admire him, because he must have sort of looked at what was going out and all what the designs which were about, and sort of thought, if I just move this here, I'll give it a little bit more of a tumble home, or make the bilge a bit sharper, I can shift this. And I just find it amazing that he was doing this and designing these cup boats and keeping ahead of all of these guys. And obviously, in 1893, there was 2 other cup boats which he designed, and Vigilant out of the 4 was the one which he was selected to defend the America's Cup, which she successfully did.
Now, the thing with the Vigilant is Charlie Barr had another run-in with her skipper, Hank Haff.
Yeah.
And it's a rivalry that had started when Hank Haff beat Thistle earlier on, when his brother was making the challenge. And so they go into the trials with this... Charlie Barr's on Vigilant. He's got to defenders the boat to beat with...
Well, he was only going to be a tri-bow horse, wasn't he? He was just there to tune the main boat up.
Well, Charlie, I don't think, saw himself as a
He
trial
didn't read the
horse.
script, did he?
He saw Hank Haff and thought, I'm going to beat this guy come what may. So even though he was given the slower boat, and he gave it his best shot, but found that at every turn, Hank Haff was barging him on the course. And Charlie Barr's thinking, what's this? I've got rights. I've got right of way. Why is he not giving way? But I think he misread the situation that Defender was already preordained by the syndicates and the committee as the faster, newer boat to defend the Cup. But Barr is furious and he quits in a complete rage and says, I've been made a fool of. And if this had been a Cup race, Vigilant had all the better positions, you'd have had to award the race to me. So even though he feels very sour about the situation, sort of storms out under a cloud and refuses to race anymore in these trials, a lot of the observers were sitting there thinking, yeah, Charlie Barr is actually probably the guy we should have chosen on the slower boat, but what happens if you put him on the faster one?
I think Charlie learned from Hank Haff that year, because later on in the later Cup contests which he was involved in, you're often criticised for using the exact same tactics which Hank Haff used against him. I mean, when I read about the sort of Charlie's sort of tactics at the start of races, I think it was a little bit like getting, captains and skippers who raced against him. It was like getting in the ring with Mike Tyson. Charlie Barr could wield his yacht like a weapon. He could pivot it. And I think when you got into close-in manoeuvres with Charlie, he would intimidate and he would frighten the life out of these opposing skippers. And as soon as they started giving way, he knew he had the better of them. And I think, this particular, we see Charlie Barr learning. He's only 24 and he's learning.
And I think it was one famous journalist said, Charlie Barr can drive this boat as if he's riding a bicycle. And that was when he gets his first chance to defend a Cup. So he's selected to sail Columbia. But as part of the deal, he's given a crew of pretty tough fishermen from Deer Island up in Maine. And at the same time, there's questions about his nationality, his eligibility. How come we're on an American boat with an all-American crew? We've been having to defend ourselves from Scottish challengers. Why should we have a Scottish skipper? There he is at the helm of Columbia. Iconic images. And then this happens during a sea trial. Captain Nat had come up with this innovation of a telescopic steel mast, which buckled halfway up. You can see it's not wood, it hasn't snapped, it's simply folded in half. But it scared the crew half to death. No one was injured, miraculously, but it caused them to mutiny against Barr. And they approached the syndicate and said, we don't want this guy. Can we switch him out? But he had good backers. Yep. Charlie Barr had the backing of Herreshoff. He had the backing of John Pierpont Morgan. He had the backing of the Commodore Iselin, if I said that correctly. And so they said, just tough it out and see through the season. Quick little.
Yeah.
This is the first American woman in the America's Cup.
Hope.
Mrs. Iselin here.
Hope Isley. And I will interrupt here because she was a pioneer photographer. She actually recorded a lot of these races with a box Browning.
A Kodak, isn't it? It's a Kodak?
I thought it was a box Browning. It was a camera.
but it's good to have good sponsors. So they win the America's Cup. The challenger was Shamrock. Shamrock won is Sir Thomas Lipton.
Well, that was the inspiration for that painting because, you know, Charlie has finally triumphed. He's the main man. Hank Haffer's gone. He's leaving Defender in his wake. He's got his backers. He's got Captain Nat, JP Morgan by his side, Spinnaker Brilliant to the finish. So he thinks at this point,
he's finally
arrived.
And he's finally leaving all his troubles behind.
Yes, yeah. I've been accepted.
There's Lipton there.
And he's back.
He probably doesn't need an introduction. You will probably have his tea in your cupboards. But he was one of the greatest challengers for the Cup, relentless. And he had, I think it was 5 challenges for the Cup.
5 challenges. He was coming back for a 6th, but unfortunately he passed away.
Never got his cup back.
Never got to lift the old mug. Next round, there's 3 America's Cup series that Charlie Barr's in. He's had his crew almost mutiny. He's beaten them. He's in the 2nd round, and then he finds himself relegated again to the position of trial horse.
Primarily, but I think it's because, after all, there was an outrage when he was in the first season about being non-American. So when the next challenge came, the backers decided, well, let's not get into all of that. Let's stick an all-American captain in with an all-American crew and an all-American boat. Uriah Rhodes. So Charlie finds himself back in it as he was earlier in his life on the trial horse, which his simple job was to make the main boat go faster. Except Charlie doesn't read the script again, does he?
Yeah. But it must have been very frustrating because he's having to go back again.
Yeah,
prove himself all over again. Meanwhile, everyone's getting excited about Constitution, which is Herreshoff's brand new rocket ship. He's made some improvements on Columbia. But even during the trials, it was fairly obvious that Charlie Barr, on the slower boat, had the better of this guy. And people would say when they looked at Columbia, there wasn't a man within several feet of Barr. Everybody had their position. It was silence on deck. Everything was running like clockwork, whereas on Constitution there's a lot of arm waving and yelling and sort of a little bit more chaotic. So Charlie Barr manages to beat Constitution in the trials, and so he's won in the slower boat. He gets to defend the Cup, and this time he gets to choose his own crew. So he selects a crew of all Norwegians, Scandinavians, and that crew would stay with him pretty much for the rest of his career. And they were nicknamed by the New York Times as the Viking Mafia.
It turned out to be quite lucky because Captain Nat was really upset because his new rocket ship hadn't been selected. But he did actually say that no matter whether it was Constitution or Columbia been selected, had Charlie Barr not been on the helm, the America's Cup would have been lost, because in both 3 races he came from behind to win. So he won 3 straight races from behind because Shamrock 2 was a faster boat, as Constitution was.
Absolutely. So then
the big boy.
So then he's finally selected for the 3rd round. This is in 1903, and Lipton challenges again, and I think, this guy?
Almost 3 years on the trial.
This guy won't go away. So what does Herreshoff respond with?
Well, he was reluctant to take on the job, but he was prevailed upon by. He was basically given an open checkbook, a free hand, but he was still reluctant to take on the job until he knew that Charlie Barr was secured for the job. And the way I look upon it, everyone was saying, well, Charlie Barr was only skipper to Sail Reliance, be out of Sail Reliance. Now, I've looked at, I was preparing for this talk and I thought, no, it's the wrong way around. I visioned that Nat Herreshoff was the master swordsmith. Charlie Barr was the master swordsman. And I honestly think that Reliance was the weapon forged by the master swordsmith for the master swordsman to vanquish Sir Thomas Lipton. And I don't think that had any other skipper been on Reliance, wouldn't be the form she was, because she was forged purely for Charlie Barr. She was the form she was because he knew that Charlie Barr was the only man who could sail this machine, and he knew what he could design because he knew the man who was going to wield the weapon.
She was just very extreme. She was one of the most...
She would heel she was 90 foot on the water line. She'd heel to a racing length of about 140 foot in 6 knots of breeze. So you can imagine if it picked up, how difficult it would be to control. I mean, she had a double wheel, so Charlie had 3 seamen to support him on the wheel to keep her under control.
He was like trying to keep it... There's the double wheel there. One of which is in the Herreshoff Museum. Billy told me a cool story about having to go and rescue one of them. So yeah, it was nice to see that the other day. But yeah, Reliance was extreme in every way. She was the greatest sail area of any sailing yacht. And if you were to see her out in the bay today, I mean, she wouldn't pass under the bridge in Narragansett, and she would eclipse most big maxi yachts today. She's certainly...
Well, that's what inspired me about this picture, because I went to the Herreshoff Museum. You hear about dimensions and sizes, but it doesn't really mean anything. And I was at the Herreshoff Museum, and I was walking around. They've got this fantastic 1/16th model of Reliance, and I was just walking along it, and I just thought, just got underneath the bow, and I thought, can you imagine what it must have been like? 60, 70 crew, heeled to the rail, that the bowsprit just right like a lance over your shoulder. And I just conceived of the painting. So I found this episode in the race, race 1, Reliance splits tacks with Shamrock 3, and she's going inshore, powers up. I thought, that's the one. To me, that's all about Reliance.
It's extraordinary. So whilst Reliance was being built in one shed,
Ingomar
was being built in the other. So Ingomar's the next schooner. Charlie Barr's got his America's Cup hat trick. He's defended the Cup successfully 3 times. And now this boat, Ingomar, the 2-masted schooner, is being built on the orders of Morton F. Plant. He was a pretty sort of brash tycoon. He sent a telegram to Herreshoff and said, "Make me a schooner and make her effing fast." And I think that was a design brief that Herreshoff liked to work with. He didn't like anyone to sort of interfere with his creative process. So he said, okay. And they went across to Germany primarily to face off against this guy. This is Kaiser Wilhelm II. He's the Emperor of Germany and Prussia. He's a cousin of the British Royals, and he's a very sort of flamboyant villain, I suppose you could say. He's the one to beat. He was very egotistical. He wanted everything his way, and I think he reminds me of some world leaders we have today. But there he is. There. I mean, if you need a more sort of flamboyant baddie, look no further. Oh, sorry, Getty Images, I didn't clear that one. Okay, and so there's a nice story. They're at Kiel Regatta. Actually, we rewind to, let me see, where is it? Clash of the Titans. So they're at Kiel Regatta. Charlie Barr's on Ingomar, and he's against Meteor, which is the Kaiser's yacht. And Charlie Barr has a member of the German Navy, a courtesy officer, standing near him at the helm. And they're both heading to the windward mark. So Ingomar's on starboard, coming up with absolutely everything strapped in. And at the same time, you've got Meteor, who they're trying to pass on port tack. And it looks like they're on collision. So they think, well, surely Meteor's going to bear away. But she doesn't.
And the Kaiser.
And they get closer the Kaiser's on board, they get closer and closer and closer. And everyone's standing on deck with their sort of mouths hanging open, looking around, sort of about to sort of brace themselves. They're thinking, is Charlie going to bear away? Is the Kaiser going to bear away? And it's like a sort of medieval jousting match, but with giant schooners out on the water in a stiff breeze. And so Barr's voice rings out to the navigator. He says, rule. And the answer comes back in a split second. He says, Ingomar right, hold course. And so he does. And at the last possible second, Meteor jams down the helm, spins that big wheel as fast as they can, and the two boats go ranging along past one another with just 3 feet between the bowsprit and Meteor's shrouds there. And I mean, that must have been a spine-chilling moment. So the courtesy officer says to Charlie, you know, why didn't you bear away? And Charlie says, when he steps behind the helm of his yacht, he ceases to become the Kaiser. So you had this sort of battle of the egos there.
Battle of the Titans.
The clash of the Titans.
Yeah.
Which you painted.
Yes, yeah. Well, when I was reading this report, I was thinking, how am I going to paint this scene? You've got these two huge egos. On the one hand, you've got the Kaiser, and on the one hand, you've got this sort of this fisherman from Scotland.
A small village in Scotland.
Yeah.
That's Ingomar in the foreground, Meteor in the back.
So I built my customary models just like Captain Nat did. And then, because dimensions, you read dimensions and they don't really mean anything. But when I made these models, I met Ingomar was like that. And Meteor 3 was like a surfboard. It was huge. And I just realized then just the mismatch between these two boats. And I just conceived of, I've got to paint these two huge egos, these two personalities locked in mortal combat, and these two disproportionate sized boats. I just want to create that tension, so I had to go close in, crop the top, the sails off, so you can actually be locked into this sort of battle between these two incredibly strong-willed people. So I call it Clash of the Titans because, they're both titanic individuals in their own way. And
there's another nice story that after the race, courtesy officer, it's actually a German admiral comes by, they apologize. The next day, however, the Kaiser, in his typical manner, comes over and sends a message to Charlie and says, well, we had our little clash out on the water. But today you're not going to win, and let's have a little wager about it. If you win, you can have anything you want. I suppose Charlie's thinking he doesn't quite have the resources of an entire empire. So he writes back and says, how about your flag? Your flag or mine? And so the Kaiser says, well, okay. And of course, we know what's going to happen. He wins the next day and sends a message across to the Kaiser to says, well, I'm ready to collect your flag. And the Kaiser says,
no way.
Oh, well, I mean, it's the sort of emblem of it's my imperial standard. I don't think I can, and starts backpedaling. Anyway, long story short, Charlie says, get me on a launch, take me across. I'm speaking to the Kaiser face to face, where he basically laid down the law and said, I ain't leaving without this flag. And this one's actually still belongs to my family. It's on display in Cowes in England.
Royal Yacht Squadron.
And it's a very impressive flag. It's obviously emblazoned with this big red eagle. It's about the size of a bedsheet. And it's one of the nicest little heirlooms we have to do with the story.
Can you imagine a fisherman from Greenock in them days standing up to the Kaiser?
He's already beat the King of England.
It's just crazy.
He's already won 3 America's Cups. But there's one great achievement and one great challenge, which brings us to our final chapter, because whilst Reliance
goes home all victorious.
Well, in 1903, you had Reliance, you had Ingomar, another one's coming out of the shed, not a Herreshoff, but it's William Gardner's design, and it's Atlantic. So it's a great year for boats, a big 3-masted schooner. And so the Kaiser makes a challenge for the Great Transatlantic Race. He's going to go one bigger, one better. He's not satisfied with losing in Kiel. 11 yachts make entries, including a lot of boats from around the eastern seaboard here. You have entries from New York Yacht Club, Indian Harbour Yacht Club, Siwanaka, Philadelphia Corinthian Yacht Club. You have a couple of British aristocrats. You have Lord Brassey with Sunbeam. You have Valhalla. And it's an open contest.
So while that's going on, Charlie's coming back. So we got this contest been arranged in the background. Charlie, in the meantime, is coming back from Europe, victorious from Ingomar. And, he's feeling, I've done pretty good in the past year or two. And then as he sort of comes home to his wife, he finds...
Well, she's very sick.
Not just sick.
She's dying. She's got tuberculosis.
And she never told him. The whole time he was away, he didn't tell her.
And the doctor said she's got about 2 weeks to live. So, of course, they'd call up Charlie Barr. They said, we'd like you to be skipper in the upcoming race. And he says, impossible. My wife has 2 weeks to live. And to cross the Atlantic is 2 weeks one way.
But it's not just that. Can you imagine how he felt? He's sort of coming back from all this victory, this incredible season. And he's thinking, pretty damn good. And then he comes home and finds that his wife's been dying while he's been doing this. And now they're knocking on his door saying, we want you to go sailing again. He must have been tormented.
It was a sort of life or death dilemma. I think he was probably traumatized as well from having been 4 years old and seeing his mother slip away in front of him and just feeling so helpless. So he refuses. But of course, the committee, the syndicate, they're people that aren't used to being told no. So they go back to him with a counteroffer. They say, Captain Barr, it's very nice that you're here at your wife's bedside. We completely understand it's a difficult situation, but your local doctor here isn't going to get her to pull through. You need the best doctors in the land, the best minds in the country, the best money can buy, and only we have access to them. So we've assembled a team of the best doctors. They're on their way now. They will look after your wife morning, noon, and night. And this is her best possible chance of survival.
What a decision you got to make here.
But you got to do the damn race. So you can imagine how that conversation went. I've thought about it in my mind, and I think it was probably her. He would have said, I don't want to do the race for these guys. I'm not interested. And she would have just said, well, do the race for me, Charlie. And so off he goes.
Not knowing whether he's going to come back and she's going to be alive or dead. That must have been.
And I mean, this was the most hotly, followed event of the season. You had this huge cavalcade of big schooners. There was an amazing spectator fleet following them out in the bay from New York.
But Atlantic wasn't really sort of primed to win, was she?
Well, all was not well on Atlantic.
No, not at all.
There was Charlie Barr had said yes at such a late stage. And also he found it very difficult working with Atlantic's owner, who was constantly contradicting every decision he made. And whilst Charlie's trying to prepare for a race,
he's looking for a booze cruise with his mates, isn't he?
He even dismisses 6 of the crew in the days before the race just so he can bring more of his friends.
More chefs, more stewards, yeah.
So Charlie Barr's had it up to here. He actually quits. They have to send a group to his house to apologise, bring him back, and so it's far from how he liked to operate.
And the New York Yacht Club orders the owner to stay off his own boat before they leave.
Do you want to say something about your Atlantic painting?
Well,
because this is her leading out through New York.
When I was sort of reading about the whole, as you'll hear, there's certain episodes in this next race which get the blood pumping now. So but why is the New York Yacht Club so obsessed with getting Charlie Barr to win this race? Why, what's so important that they'll even tell the owner of his own boat, you ain't going, we need this guy. you're staying away from your boat, make him happy because we need him to do this race. And I thought it's because I envisaged that Atlantic was like some great big knight in some medieval knights on a black stallion racing across the bay to meet the imperial powers, because these imperial powers represented the old world, Germany and the British Empire, and this was the new world sending forth their champion to do battle, to challenge and say, look, no, you ain't got control of the seas anymore. There's a new guy on the block. There's a new champion. And I saw the rising buildings of Manhattan rising like a Camelot in the background. So I thought, that's, to me, is what this the whole 1905 battle was all about. It was about America impressing upon the world that it was a new rising power, and Atlantic was a symbol for it, and that Manhattan, as it grew, was a sign of the changing order of things.
It was sort of national pride.
Massively national pride, yes.
So they were off, and the boat to beat is the Kaiser's yacht, Hamburg, and there's a crew shot there, at the crew of Atlantic about to make history, and they're sailing out. First 3 days is quite slow, but then the breeze begins to fill in, and they manage to leave Hamburg behind them. And then the whole fleet gets engulfed by a storm. And it's quite a severe storm. It starts to build over the process of about 3 days, until the point where the owner becomes very scared, and he comes up on deck and he says, Charlie, we can't take it anymore. All I can hear down below is ripping sails, creaking spars. He had these fine skylights on the hatches made by Tiffany's of New York, all this fine, brand new stained glass, all smashed in. There's water washing through ankle deep through the saloon. All the guests are being rattled around down below. And so he says to Charlie, we've got to quit the race. And Charlie says, no way, man. We're racing. So when the owner appears a second time and says, I hired you and I'm giving you an order, we quit the race. Charlie's, all he's thinking about is getting home to his wife before she dies. So he says, okay, fine. We'll settle this. We'll take down the sails. And the owner tramps back down the companionway. And Charlie must have been there thinking, I'm not going to go home to find my wife dead, to have this man ruin my reputation and go home a loser in disgrace. So he follows the owner back down the companionway a couple of minutes later, pulls out a big old bunch of keys, locks the door, and the owner and all his guests are hammering on the doors. What are you doing, man? And he just says, you hired me to win. And by God, sir, that's what I'm going to do. And that's what he did. He came blasting out of the storm with a clear 3-day lead. He sets a new Atlantic record that lasts 75 years as a speed record. He beats the German Kaiser. The Americans win. And best of all, because he took all of the risks, his wife got the extra care.
Yeah,
she survives.
I was doing the research in the New York Times, and there's this wonderful little excerpt which says, victorious Captain Charlie Barr returns home after setting a record for the transatlantic race to find his wife Emily on the jetty to meet him.
And she's quoted in the New York Times as saying, I got well the moment I heard that Charlie had won the race. And that concludes our talk, ladies and gents, so I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks very much. We went a bit over time. Of course we were going to go over time. How can we pack it all in? So we'll roll straight into a Q&A, and then in about 5-10 minutes, we'll have to head upstairs. Well, I was just racing on Atlantic, actually. A man called Ed Castellin decided he wanted to recreate the most legendary yacht of them all. The original Atlantic was broken up in Virginia in 1980. So we crewed with about There she is. So this is just the other day. This is in June. I was here on the middeck. I was on Yankee trim. Hope it's looking okay, actually. Yeah. Right. And we were racing against the other Herreshoff schooner, Elena. It was an amazing event. But we had about 30 crew. So, you know, these big schooners like Elena, I was on Eleonora as well, which is a copy of Westwood. I went all around the Med, across the Atlantic, around the Caribbean. So we had 8 permanent crew. But when you go racing, instead of doing everything one at a time, you need everything to happen together.
The problem on the transatlantic is Charlie had actually reduced his crew by 18 because Wilson Marshall wanted stewards, chefs, waiters, and engineers, because he was planning on doing a cruise in the Mediterranean after the race was finished. So he had all these guys on board who were basically not going to work the ship or share watches, and he had to sort of obviously
dead weight.
Didn't can't have a full complement of crew, so he had a smaller crew than he really required.
How big is Atlanta?
180 foot on the waterline.
240 something on deck or overall?
Overall.
Yeah, overall, yeah.
So,
Yes, please.
So when you were racing, you have winches.
Yes, we definitely have winches. And actually, the Yankee, this big jib top here, this giant jib top, you know, when you're close hauled, I had about 5 or 6 wraps on this big sort of 500 winch, and it was still slipping, you know. It's
So when they were doing it, they were not using winches.
I think they had a couple of winches, but not
Well, they had
many.
capstan, but
Yeah,
they were
yeah.
trimming.
They were made of sterner stuff
Yeah.
back in those days. There's a famous quote, actually, because the owner kept coming up and interfering with the crew and saying, you've got to let that go, ease that one off. So one of the things when Charlie Barr had locked them in, was arguing with them, he said to the crew, padlock the sheets.
Yeah.
And they actually had chain stoppers on the sheets to keep them in place and keep anyone from easing them off when he was having a few short minutes rest in the bunk. Yes.
What happened when the owner was free?
Well, they crossed the finish line and they won the race. So, no, I think he was probably released after the storm. There's 2 different versions of what happened. There's Wilson Marshall, the owner's version, and then there's everyone else's.
Yeah.
According to Wilson Marshall, you know, he had to get up there. He had to put his arm around Charlie.
Go for it, Charlie. Don't give up. Yeah, basically, yeah. They took all the glory.
But obviously, Barr gets dismissed, you know, but they never want to see each other again. But they've made history. They've won the Kaiser's Cup, and, you know, the wife survived. They all lived happily ever after, you know. So it was done. They got the job done. Yes, sir.
Atlantic ended up being owned by an Eastern member,
Yeah.
Gerald Lambert.
Is that right?
Yes.
This is what I love.
He owned Yankee, didn't he?
Yes.
Yes, of course he did, yeah. Gerald Lambert.
It was a flagship here for a while.
Yes, that's correct.
This is great because, you know, this typifies my sort of journey. Is I go to all these different places, and then there's another little piece of the puzzle. So it's always great when I hear new information. Although it wasn't new to Shane.
No, because our next project is the history of the Jays, and Gerald Lambert's.
Also broken by an Eastern member, a boy, J.B. Brown.
Is that right?
Yeah, Nicorette.
Correct,
Correct.
right.
So yes, the record exists in different versions. There's the speed record. There's the race record. I mean, Eric Taberley broke the speed record in 1980, but he also did it in a foiling trimaran, which is quite.
Monohull race.
Yeah.
And then there's the monohull record, but that was not in a race or not in the official race course.
They left when they wanted to leave.
Exactly.
Yes,
So
yeah.
they looked at the weather radar and they decided the best day to leave.
Let's go now.
So that's why we say that it's a 100-year record, because it's the official monohull race record. So it's a little bit wordy, but it's still 100 years. So something to be proud of. Any more questions? I mean, feel free to come and chat to us afterwards. If there's no more questions, maybe it's a good time to go and get a drink.
Absolutely.
I know I need one. Thank you very much. You've been very kind. Thanks for having us.